Hello and welcome to my short training video, I guess you could say, since this is not a live webinar, on how to get started writing your book. Stop procrastinating, because I know so many of you have great book ideas, but you never seem to sit down and write. So that's kind of what today is all about, or what this video is all about, is to get you started. In case you don't know me, I am Amanda Schaffner. I am an author and a writing coach. So you can find all my writing coach stuff at thepathofleastrevision.com, and of course all my author stuff is under my own name. I am a motivator, and you can see there that that is the internet cheerleader sign. And I'm also a serial book starter. I like to start books, but I don't always finish them, which often has to do with getting started, or basically sitting down to write doesn't always happen, even if you have an idea, and even if you start writing a little bit. You can follow me on Twitter. I am at @amschaffner, and tweet with the hashtag WSidekick for your own internet cheerleaders, and there are some awesome people who are updating about their progress and discussing issues that they're going through, and we do weekly writing sprints every Wednesday, so that's a great place to be. Alright, a lot of times you will hear the advice, just sit down and write. Just sit down and write, and that's how you get started writing. And it's true, but it's also the hardest advice ever. So it is the easiest and the hardest all at once. And the problem with that is you come up with so many excuses for why you can't sit down and write. I should write, but I have to do the dishes. Or I should write, but I don't have a lot of time right now. Or those phrases are basically your reasons or excuses for not sitting down to write. And that is part of the reason why it is so hard to sit down and write. But the good news is everything is fixable. Right? The dishes, you can do the dishes. The time issue, you have to dig deep in your schedule and time, or to find time. Anything that you dislike about your manuscript can be fixed, so you can do it. Let's talk how. The first thing that I like people to do is set a writing schedule. And it sounds kind of scary, but it's actually super easy, because I'm going to make you ask yourself 2 questions, and then you have a writing schedule. That's it. The first question is, obviously, how much are you writing right now? Because here's the truth. Even if you want to write 4,000 words every day, and it's cool if that's what you want to do, because a lot of full-time writers will write that much, if you're not writing that much already, you're going to have a very difficult time to sit down and write. It's like going out to run a 5K. If you've never run before, or you haven't run in a while, you are not going to go out and run 3 miles right away. You are going to start probably under a mile. And that's okay. This isn't about how much you want to write, it's how much you are writing right now, even if that's 0. Basically, if you're comfortable with how much you're writing, keep it at that. If something's bothering you about your numbers, drop it. Or if you're at 0, you need to increase it. If you're not writing anything, you have to increase it. Also, if you're consistently outwriting your goal, increase it. So some examples here. Obviously, if you're comfortable with how much you're writing, you're good. But if something's bothering you about your numbers, I know that when I went through Camp Nano in July, I was doing 500 words every day, and I was able to do it, but it started becoming a chore. And all I did was I dropped it down to 400 words every day in August. That was it, just a little bit. And that was all I needed to get back in the chair and excited about writing again, even though I ended up writing about 500 words every day anyways. So sometimes it's a mental game. And if you are outwriting your goals consistently, if maybe you have your goal is 10 minutes every day and you find yourself writing 20, 30 minutes, maybe it's time to increase that, especially if you want to build up to 2 hours every day or 4,000 words every day or whatever your goal is. So you want to build your way up to there. And if you're at 0, don't worry about it. Start small. And this is really the key. Start small. 10 minutes, 300 words, you're not locked into these numbers. But you have to get into the routine of writing, and starting small is how you do it. And it doesn't matter whether you choose minutes or words or scenes or chapters or pages to track your goals. It's about what works for you. Pick whatever is most appealing. You can change it later. I like words much in the same way that I prefer running distances rather than time, because the faster that I can get to the finish line, the faster I'll be done. In theory, if I can knock out 400 words in 10 minutes, I'm done for the day, whereas 30 minutes, I might drag my feet because I know it doesn't matter. I don't know. It's a mind game. Then you want to ask yourself, how often, right? How often do you want to write? Or how much? It doesn't have to be every day. I actually caution against writing every day because your brain kind of needs a creativity break, especially if you haven't trained yourself to write every day. And some of my best ideas hit me on the weekend when I'm not writing, because it kind of gives my brain time to play. So one way to answer this question is to take a look at your commitments in free time. You have to give yourself non-writing free time. So if your schedule's on the fuller side, don't expect to write a lot. And part of that is just being okay with not writing a lot. Some people can crank out an entire novel or a book in a month. Some people, it takes 6 months, a year, or whatever. It doesn't matter as long as you finish. Because really, what this comes down to is if you don't take care of yourself and your mental health, your writing will suffer. So if you burn out trying to fit in a whole bunch of writing when your schedule is full and you have all these commitments, it's not good. You don't want to burn out. You don't want your writing to suffer. If you are struggling to find time in your schedule, here are a couple suggestions. You can wake up a little earlier than you need to. I know that this is perhaps not the most favorite of ways to find a little time in your schedule, but often when you wake up earlier, the house is quiet, there's less going on social media, and you have a lot more focus time. You can write on your lunch break. You can use dictation software. Your phone can work for this. So if you're on the go, maybe you're in the car, you can dictate. You can just talk your book out. That works too. And the way that I have this set up, I don't set a deadline. So my deadline comes from how long it will take me based on my writing schedule, because you don't want to break your neck and burn out to finish your book, which I already kind of... If you do have a deadline in mind, that's okay. Use it as motivation to keep going, but don't approach it in a do-or-die fashion, because, again, that will negatively affect your writing. Then your writing schedule is basically those two answers together. Mine looks like 400 words every weekday. Yours may be 10 minutes every weekday at lunch or 500 words every morning. If you are wondering when you should write, what time, that's completely up to you. Some schedules aren't flexible, so the time is built in at lunch in the morning. Other times it's about fitting writing in where you can. And then bonus, you want to repeat this process every single week. Go through the same thing. How much am I writing? How do I feel about it? How much can I write this week? And that is helpful too when you have a busy week coming up. You can drop your goal for the week a little bit, or if you want to take a day off, you can kind of plan ahead and make sure that you maintain the same amount of writing, but you still have that day off. And now the reason this works is that it basically encourages you to build a habit, but also keeping track of how you are feeling and how, because if you try to sit down and write almost 2,000 words, I think the typical nano is 1,667 words every day. If you try to do that right away, you may do it for a few days, but then it becomes a chore. It gets difficult. You burn out. You stop. And not only do you stop, but you don't want to continue. So if you start really small, you don't write a lot, but you build excitement. You are excited to start the next day. And if your goal is small, it doesn't mean you have to stop there. I think I originally started at about 300 words a day, and some days I would write 1,000 words. That's perfectly okay. So you're not locked into it either. But starting small helps. All right. The second thing is establish your writing environment. And if you're thinking, but Amanda, I already know what my writing environment is, I'd be like, nope. So here's the thing. You want to choose, and I'm going to do this out of order, you want to choose 3 to 4 potential writing spots. This is where you write. And the reason I have you choose multiple spots is that too much of the same routine is bad. I find that writing in my office is my ticket to productivity for a week, and then I get bored and I'm on the internet all the time instead of writing, so I'll shift to writing in my room, which becomes my new productive spot, because in my room then I can close the shades and I have my writer's cave, right? And that becomes my new productive spot. So I don't really stay in one spot very long, and sometimes I'll even change spots in the middle of writing. The benefit of moving around like that is that you literally have a different view in each writing spot. So the change of scenery will jumpstart your brain and creativity. You don't want the same old of your surroundings to seep in your writing. And I also have specific places for specific reasons too. My office desktop computer, I have 2 large screens so I can spread out and see more. I already told you about writing in my room where I can draw the curtains. I have my writer's cave. I also like writing at the library, which tends to be a last resort when I'm extremely distracted, because it really does remove the distractions of home. So you want multiple writing spots, and you bounce between them depending on how you're feeling that day. And then let's talk about what you write with. Now, this isn't you need to be using Scrivener, even though I love Scrivener. Whether you're using Scrivener or Word by hand, whether you're dictating it, that doesn't matter. This is more taking advantage of a cloud service like Dropbox or Google Drive, even if you do write by hand. Because if you're going to be bouncing around to different writing spots, you might have to change computers. And if you change computers, you need to be able to access your manuscript at any computer. And that's why a cloud service works for this. Even if you prefer to write by pen and paper, which is great, take the time to transcribe your writing so you have the electronic backup you can access anywhere. I keep all my writing files on Dropbox and my business writing in Google Drive. Google Drive, the benefit to that is that you can use it when you're on a computer that you don't own. It's a little bit easier to use. And this also allows you, in case something happens with your computer, you have a backup somewhere else. And you want to make sure that you always have multiple backups. Then we can just talk about distractions. Now, they're not always as tangible as social media, but here are some common ones. Family, friends, and loved ones, your cell phone, checking social media or blogs or other time-suck websites. I know that BuzzFeed quizzes tend to be very popular. A messy desk might be a distraction. You might have your inner editor or your inner naysayer distracting you. And even though it feels kind of like you're borrowing trouble by coming up with everything that could go wrong, this is really to your advantage because then you identify the solutions to your distractions. If you know what you're going to do about a problem before it happens, you'll have a plan of action when you do encounter it. And you will encounter these problems at some point. Not all at the same time, and it won't always be the same problem, but they will pop up. And so when you realize you become distracted, try out one of your solutions. Different solutions may work at different times, but they should be part of your arsenal before you begin. This is all about planning your attack of writing. All right, so the solutions in the same order as the distractions. So you have set clear boundaries when you write. For example, closed door equals writing equals do not disturb. Or choose a different writing spot where you know family, friends, whatever, won't be an issue. You could turn your cell phone off, put it in a different room, or put it on silent and flip it upside down so you don't see the flashing notifications. I do the last one. Silent, upside down. Works great. All right. If you are distracted by basically the internet, you could turn off the internet completely, or you could use full screen on your word processor, close out all your browser windows and set a timer, write by hand away from the computer, or use a productivity app. If you have a messy desk, clean it up. If you have an inner editor issue, you may want to write with a pen and paper, so no erasing or scribbling out words. You want to start with free writing and just kind of brain dump everything out. You could use something like Write or Die to force yourself to get the words out without paying attention to what they sound like. And Write or Die, if you're not familiar with it, is basically a timed feature where you set the time and you set your word count, and then it kind of yells at you when you stop typing. You can get the same kind of idea if you set a timer, although no one will tell you when you stop writing. And if you have a naysayer, which I think we all do, you could write down what your naysayer tells you. You suck at writing, you're never going to finish this, your characters are boring, and so on, and then come up with something positive to say to your naysayer and keep saying it until the doubts go away. That is your writing environment. And then lastly, we have your idea. Because without an idea, your book is nothing. If you don't have an idea, you don't have a book. Which is why it's important. So your why or problem drives the entire book. Everything you write, and I really do mean everything, is going to revolve around your problem or why. I'm making a big deal about this because if you don't know what this is now, your book's going to be all over the map when you write. Clear idea? This time editing. And my business is called The Path of Least Revision, so I'm serious when I say you need to know your problem or your why. So if you're wondering what is my why or what is my problem, here's kind of what I would say. Fiction writers, you're going to have the problem, and the best way to do this is to frame your problem in the form of a question. If I did this for Elusive Memories, which is my first novel, I'd probably write, will Sam learn who she is and escape to safety? For Hidden Illusions, which is the sequel, I'd write, will Janie get her revenge on Reed, but also who will prevail? Hunters or gifted, because the latter closes out a story arc. You can have more than one question, but you've got to know what they are, because those questions drive the entire story. For nonfiction writers, write a mission statement. And that can be as easy as, I'm writing this book because, or I'm writing this book to. I wrote The Blogger's Mindset to explore reasons why bloggers burned out and because I wanted to help people not burn out. I wrote blog events because I wanted to break down my experience with Bada Books, which is my online readathon, so it could help others create their own events. If you're unsure of your story's problem or your book's why, don't move on. You want to get really clear on what your idea is. Go for a walk. Spend time with your family. Let it sit in your brain. Talk to someone about it, because you will be all over the map when you start writing, and that kind of uncertainty in your writing is going to make it more difficult for you to sit down. You're going to get discouraged. So know it. And once you know it, a good way of getting it down, because you probably will want to write it, whether it's on a piece of paper or on your computer, wherever. And the quick way to do this is to set a timer for 15 to 20 minutes and craft a synopsis. And the reason I say set a timer is because it forces you to focus on getting it down and not worrying about how it sounds, and two, that's really all the time you need to spend on it. A synopsis may sound like a big, important word, but all it needs to be is what happens in this book. It's not written in stone. You're free to deviate from it if your book takes you in an unexpected direction, and that happens, but you need to have a starting point, and your idea, your synopsis, is your starting point. I like to call it your outline. It is not your English teacher's outline. It's just a general one. Let's see. Yes, you need to be clear. So let's also talk about that's the 3 steps, but I also want to talk about the F word, failure, because this is what stops people from writing, is that they feel like they're failing, they feel like they suck, you know, they're never going to do it, they try something, it doesn't work. And with failure, we tend to assume that because whatever we're doing isn't working, that it's done, that's it, there's something else we can do, and we failed. But when something isn't working, right, failure, it shows you, all it does is says this isn't working, which means it's up to you to figure out what does work. There is never one way to write. People write in many different ways. If you try something and it doesn't work, that means you need to try something else. Failure is a call to experiment and be flexible. Don't give up. Be stubborn. I think writers need to be incredibly stubborn, because if they come up against some sort of block, if something isn't working, it's not failure. It just means they have to try something different. And failure doesn't define you. If you, in quotes, fail, doesn't mean you are a failure. It means maybe that story idea wasn't right, so you have to go back and fix it. I promise. All right. Before we go, I want to talk about the Writing Sidekick, because here is a place where you can get support and accountability, and if you need that little extra push, that's what we're here for. We do weekly writing sprints. We do gold check-ins on Mondays, and on Fridays I ask if you've accomplished those goals. And we have some awesome writers. You can find more information about that at www.thewritingsidekick.com. I would love to see you there. And good luck on writing your book.